Before this video starts, I want to let all of you know that this is my third attempt at trying to make this video. Also, a lot of my footage during the recording process was either corrupted or lost, so I apologize if what I talk about doesn't match up correctly with what I'm showing. Or some footage seems off. Don't worry, I fixed the problem for the future videos. It's just the same that happened for this game. I also want to give a shout out to my editor Chandler for doing what he could with what I gave him and for helping put this video together. I love you, buddy. And I hope you guys enjoy this video nonetheless. Also, an additional note, I am currently sick if you couldn't tell. So, I apologize if my voice throws you off, but that is okay because I got some tea here. That's hot. We're going to make the most of it and we're going to get through it together. Anyway, take it away, future me. 2018's God of War was without a doubt one of the best games of the entire PlayStation generation. I even remember reading an article that claimed it was the best game ever. And though I didn't personally agree with that, I also didn't disagree with it. The original trilogy of games set in Greek mythology were some of the best their generation had to offer, so the reboot of the franchise had to hit, and it had to hit hard. In the documentary, Raising Kratos, it goes in depth about the struggle and challenges Santa Monica Studios faced while developing God of War. Everything from music to gameplay had to hit every beat so well to be considered of a worthy reboot, and it was near perfect. So when God of War Ragnarök was teased back in 2020, you could bet those stakes were raised by 100. God of War Ragnarök is my game of the year, and it's everything I've waited for since I beat the first game. Now, as always, this isn't a traditional review or a critique, but rather a video of me expressing my thoughts, whether thought out or raw, about how I feel about the game, and anything I miss or don't talk about will likely be explored in future videos. I want to start off by talking about God of War Ragnarok's story, as it is really enjoyable, and having sat on the game for a few weeks now, I'm able to really get my thoughts out there. So we're introduced to an older Kratos and an even older Atreus when the game starts. Kratos killing Baldur in the last game sets off Fimbulwinter, which means they're right on track for Ragnarök. Just in this first chapter, we know Freya is still after Kratos for killing her son, and Atreus appears to be way more capable of handling himself this time around. We are also introduced to Atreus' wolf Fenrir. Fenrir, however, is sick and dying, but as he lay dying, Atreus casts a spell that takes Fenrir's soul out of his body, sending it out into the air, and a piece of it going into Atreus' knife. More on that later. As Atreus goes to bury the wolf, Kratos catches up on some sleep where he sees Faye in a dream who warns him of danger that he'll soon face. When he awakes, Kratos goes looking for Atreus and he gets attacked by a bear. After nearly killing the bear, it is revealed to be Atreus, who was so overcome with grief and anger he turned into one. Atreus! Once the two arrive back home, they're paid a visit from Thor and the Raven God himself, Odin.
I come in? I have meat.
You would not find me good company.
No. I'm sure we'll find lots to talk about.
Okay, quick little sidebar here. I love Odin's portrayal in this game so much that I'm considering making a video just on his character alone.
I have a better idea of who we're dealing with. Now, what you did to his boys. Self-defense. Dying is what we Aesir live for. And let's be honest, they were kinda useless. You have a debt. You're no fun anymore.
What do you want?
How about peace?
No.
Anyway, Odin offers Kratos a deal to seek no fight with him or his people, and for Atreus to stop searching for Tyr, and when Kratos turns him down, Odin sticks Thor on him, and what follows is probably one of the best opening boss fights in gaming history, even bigger than what they did with Baldur in the last game.
About time. I've been waiting for this. You're not from here. We got a tradition called blood payments. It means I get a piece of you for what you took from my family. You'll pick it up.
This is your Modi! You put him last, even in death.
The fuck you say?
Modi sought us in fear of you. He died of the wounds you gave him.
Oh, we got a model father here.
Thor and Kratos go at it.
Clever. Clever won't beat me. I see why my sons fell to you. Even this lesser version of you. But I am not my sons. And your boy, Allfather, have plans for him.
Kratos eventually getting the last punch, and them going their separate ways. Kratos heads back to confront Atreus about his dishonesty, to which Atreus replies by showing his father the secrets hidden behind a Jotnar shrine that depict Tyr leading the charge to war. Kratos and Atreus move in with Sindri and Brock since their protection save was broken, and from that point they start their search for Tyr. After obtaining a way to realm travel using Yggdrasil seed, Kratos and Atreus make their way to Svartalfheim. Sparing you the details of the amount of enemies I had to kill to get there, we eventually find Tyr, locked away and chained up, and claims to have been tortured by Odin. We set him free, and he explains to us that his days of fighting and war are over. We take him back to Sindri's house, as we are now one step closer to fulfilling the prophecy. Shortly after bringing Tyr back, Kratos and Mimir talk about how Atreus may be in over his head, and how all he wants is for his son to be safe. Atreus listens on through the outside window, and he says he's going to try to convince Freya to help them with Sindri, trying to dissuade him, saying that she will kill him for what Kratos did. Sindri fails, but he does accompany Atreus on his trip. It's at this moment where the game puts us in control of Atreus, and I was actually surprised at how much fun I personally had as playing him. He isn't as satisfying as Kratos, obviously, but I thought it'd be similar to taking over as MJ or Miles in Marvel's Spider-Man, and it wasn't like that. It was a lot of fun. After traveling back to Midgard, we get to see Jormungandr again, the World Serpent, who has a conversation with Atreus. It's never explicitly stated what they talk about, but what Atreus gets from it is the word Ironwood, and Jormungandr leaves Atreus still with more questions. After fighting off some enemies, Atreus reaches Freya and tries to convince Freya to join the fight, revealing that Tyr is alive and they have the upper hand. Freya declines the offer and warns Atreus not to come back. On the way back to see Sindri, Sindri confesses to Atreus that Brock died a while back, and he retrieves 3 of his 4 soul parts to bring him back to life. But more on that later. Atreus and Sindri sneak back home before setting off to Alfheim. Kratos and Atreus head to Alfheim with Tyr in tow. Once there, they discover a shrine with the hidden message containing Groa's secret. Ragnarök isn't the destruction of all worlds, but the destruction of Asgard, which means that Odin has been preparing for Ragnarök the wrong way, working off of a false prophecy. When Tyr sees that he's the one prophesied to lead the charge, he gets in denial and gets in a mood, taking that time to be alone with his thoughts. The 3 travel back to Sindri's house after visiting Alfheim and sit down to have dinner, where Atreus is now more confident than ever that he's becoming who he's supposed to be, and the prophecy is coming together. Kratos checks Atreus' hubris in somewhat a demeaning way, which causes Atreus to lose his appetite and angrily rush to his room to sleep. While sleeping, he awakes in what looks like a kind of state of limbo, where he witnesses a lot of his events from the first game in this grainy kind of ultra-fictional transition. I don't think this part is meant to represent anything deep, but rather having an older Atreus view his younger self while the game transitions to the next chapter.
Sit down before the tea gets cold.
Take a little tea break. It goes down smooth.
It's a body fluid of mine.
Thank you very much.
Atreus wakes up in an unfamiliar place. The place is colorful, vibrant, and seemingly teeming with wildlife, both hostile and docile. Atreus is surprised by a young woman who is quickly revealed to be Angrboda, another giant whose sole purpose in life is to tell Loki, Atreus, his fate. I just want to say these 2 meeting for the first time was one of my favorite scenes in the game. The awkward teenage romantic tension is there from the start, and Angrboda especially becomes likable, as she's been alone for a very, very long time, and socializing isn't her specialty. The place we're in is Ironwood, which Jormungandr mentioned earlier, and after meeting, she leads Loki back to her, for lack of a better term, home, where she reveals Atreus' fate is to serve Odin after his father dies in his arms. This causes Atreus to panic and become extremely angry, causing him to turn into a wolf. Angrboda calls him down and invites him to do chores around Ironwood, riding on the back of her yak, Yala. Before giving Atreus a bag of marbles that contain the souls of giants, similar to the one we saw him with in the beginning. After that, she attempts to part ways as her role in this story is supposed to be done, but Atreus attempts to convince her otherwise. On their way back, they see a wolf getting kidnapped as well as animals left with no soul. Angrboda says this is her grandmother's doing, so they head to her house to attempt to stop her and save the wolf. Upon arriving at this house, it's clear Angrboda's grandma is a giant, like a literal giant. They traverse the house, looking for a way in it, and eventually stumble upon a room of soulless animals. Atreus takes a soul out of one of the giant marbles and places it inside a snake, but more on that later. After trying to escape, we see Angrboda's grandmother. A boss fight ensues, with the gimmick being to target the cauldron she's holding, as that's how she's been corrupted. Another side note is that this was a really fun boss fight, running around this giant's kitchen. It was really enjoyable. After defeating her, Atreus and Angrboda leave while her grandmother berates her, leaving her sad and unsure. To cheer her up, Atreus challenges her to a race, which was a really fun set piece to close out this chapter. Back at her home, Angrboda attempts to comfort Atreus about his fate before leaving Ironwood and wishing to be sent home, only to be sent back to his home in Midgard. He attempts to make his way back to Sindri's house, only to be greeted at the gate by Kratos, who is understandably angry that Atreus has been gone for 2 days. He scolds him, but is ambushed by some enemies, and he even gets attacked by a Valkyrie, who is revealed to be Freya. Before attempting to kill Kratos, Atreus turns into Bjorn, and Kratos holds him off, telling him that Freya is their friend and they don't want to hurt her. Freya contemplates for a minute and tells Kratos that he is more useful to her alive, and she could use this help with breaking the spell of Odin. And that means traveling to Vanaheim. Kratos, Freya, and Brock travel to Vanaheim to free Freya from her curse. It is in this chapter that we learn Freya has learned a way to bypass Odin's spell by turning herself into a falcon. While in Vanaheim, they run into a stranger revealed to be Freya's brother, Freyr, and he guides them towards the right direction. Kratos and Freya eventually arrive at the spell, which is tied in a very intricate knot using the roots of the World Tree, and heavily guarded by Nidhogg, a dragon-like beast that can crawl through realms. Once defeated and the spell is broken, they head back to Freya's camp, where Freya and her brother make up. They travel back to Sindri's house, where Kratos confronts Atreus about his dishonesty, but Atreus retorts because Kratos isn't listening or trusting him, saying he and his mom kept secrets, but it's not okay for him to do so. Further arguments ensues, eventually causing Atreus to turn into Bjorn again, raging out of the house and using the gateway to travel to Midgard, where he takes shelter at Freya's turtle's house and is eventually transported to Asgard via Odin's ravens. In Asgard, Atreus meets a Midgardian named Skilder, and after introductions, he climbs a very tall wall, and we're greeted to Heimdall. Atreus convinces Heimdall to let him see Odin, even though Heimdall's powers allow him to know his true intentions. A mini boss fight occurs between Atreus and Heimdall, with Heimdall blocking and dodging every single attack. Thor steps in to stop the fight, followed by Odin greeting Atreus and scolding Heimdall for antagonizing his guest. Odin shows Atreus around Asgard and leads him to his sleeping quarters, where Atreus takes the room of Modi. Atreus is threatened by a woman later revealed to be Thrud, the daughter of Thor and Lady Sif, but turns out she's pretty cool. Another really cool side note is something really small I thought was interesting, is that Magni had blonde hair like Sif and Modi had red hair like Thor, but Thrud has a mixture of both of them. It's not a huge thing, but I thought it was really cool. Once you join Odin in his study, he gives you a mass fragment as well as a flying magical sword named Ingrid, which acts as your companion attack, even though Thor is traveling with you, because Odin tasks the two of you with finding the other pieces of the mask, and since Loki can read the language written on the mask, he has value to him, so the two of them make their way to Muspelheim. A bunch of cool stuff happens here. They find a piece of the mask, and Angrboda appears for a bit, but more on that later, and they travel back to Asgard and rest for the night. Kratos, meanwhile, is concerned about Atreus, and he and Freya seek out the Norns to discover their fate. After finding the Norns, they tell him that Heimdall intends to kill Atreus, and that Kratos' journey is also coming to an end. Knowing Heimdall has never been and seemingly can't be beaten, they seek out a weapon that can give them an advantage. Also, Freya finds the noose that Odin hung himself with, but more on that later. After traveling back to Sindri's house, he gives him a Draupnir ring with special abilities and says that Kratos needs to go see the lady to get the weapon made. Brock offers to go, but Sindri objects, seemingly pleading not to let Brock go. Kratos shuts him down, and Kratos, Freya, and Brock travel to Svartalfheim again to meet the lady. Once there, the lady takes the ring, makes a spear capable of multiplying itself, and hopes to overwhelm Heimdall's senses. Before they leave, Brock tries to ask the lady to bless the spear, but she ignores him and swims away. Mimir points out that mermaids talk to our souls, not our bodies, specifically a part Brock is missing. And Brock immediately knows what he is talking about. Kratos asks Brock to bless it for him instead, which is a really sweet moment. And then we're able to play with the spear for a while to get used to it. Visited by Odin, he makes a couple threats, and we head back home. Kratos is tired and takes a nap, and again has another dream about Faye, this time with Atreus as a baby, as they row their boat home, with Faye providing Kratos with some much needed advice on how to open himself up to his kid. Another tea break.
Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one.
When Kratos awakes, we transition to Atreus back in Asgard, where Odin sends him, Thrud, and Heimdall to Helheim to find the other piece of the mask. Once arriving, Heimdall leaves them, saying he has another task for the Allfather, while Atreus and Thrud proceed through Hel. After defeating some enemies and solving some puzzles, the mask leads them to Garm, the Hound of Hel. Atreus insists that the mask fragment is behind Garm, and the Hound means no harm, he just wants to be set free. Atreus and Thrud free Garm, and he runs rampant through hell, and Atreus is shocked to see the mass fragment isn't there. Thrud lashes out as his failure makes her look bad, and Heimdall appears to scold both of them before returning to Asgard empty-handed. Atreus tells Odin he's ready to go back home, and Odin lets him, reminding him he is no prisoner in Asgard, but before returning he must give back Ingrid and the mask. When Atreus arrives back at Sindri's house, it is being attacked by Hellwalkers. After clearing them out, Atreus reunites with his father, who seems more relieved than upset, before telling all of them that he is the one who freed Garm. We found out that Garm is able to tear through the fabric of realms, and that Hellwalkers are just the beginning. Kratos and Atreus travel back to Helheim to attempt to stop the beast. When Kratos and Atreus arrive in Hell, they seek out Garm to stop his destruction. I have to say this is one of my favorite chapters in the game. It houses some of the best dialogue between Kratos and Atreus, and actually has them communicating and listening to each other, and houses one of the best boss fights, Garm. You fight Garm twice as he comes back to life because he has no soul. This gives Atreus an idea as he launches himself on top of Garm, stabbing him with his knife. This causes Garm to retreat, and we find out that Garm is now Fenrir. Atreus' knife contained the soul of Fenrir, and is called out by Kratos and Angrboda, and we finally see it come to fruition here. And Fenrir is just the biggest, sweetest boy. It's actually amazing. Kratos sends Fenrir back to Midgard, and the two return to Sindri's house, but not before Kratos shares a rather tender moment, opening up more to his son. When they return, Freya makes her way back to Vanaheim to prepare with her brother and Kratos, and Atreus follows suit. This is where we meet Hildisvíni, who was the boar that Atreus shot back in the first game, in human form. Okay, that's cool, I think. Back in Vanaheim, we find out Freyr has been abducted, and we go to rescue him. On the way there, we run into Heimdall, and after a fun boss fight, Kratos warns him to back off. But after admitting he wants to kill Atreus, another fight ensues, and Kratos strangles Heimdall to death, prompting one of the best lines from Ymir. I don't know if... fate's breaking us. After killing Heimdall, Kratos retrieves Gjallarhorn, from which it is the instrument to call all realms to Asgard for war, and after rescuing Freyr, a fun chase ensues. We get on a magical flying boat and arrive safely back at camp. Well, most of us. After returning back to Sindri's house, the group gather around the table to discuss their next move. Atreus thinks it would be wise to retrieve the mask from Odin, which means him returning back to Asgard. Kratos and the group are skeptical at first, but trust Atreus enough to get the job done. Atreus travels back to Midgard, where he runs into Angrboda again, and she gives him a marble with the name Loki on it. Shortly after, Atreus arrives back in Asgard, informing Odin that he has read the mask wrong, and the final piece isn't in Helheim, it's in Niflheim. Thor is traveling with us again, but we have to go get him from a bar. After failing to convince him to leave, a bar fight ensues, and if you told me that in the sequel to God of War we would have a bar fight in Asgard with Thor, I'd call you a freaking idiot. But this entire section is freaking awesome. After that ends, Thrud scolds her father and for reverting back to his old ways, and soon after, Atreus and Thor are transported to Niflheim. After traversing the realm, we reach a point where we find the final mass fragment, at which point Odin immediately shows up to collect. Then Sif enters with Hrist and Mist to arrest Atreus for the murder of Heimdall. Odin dismisses this, but Sif reminds Thor that Atreus is the reason for their son's death, which causes Thor to lash out, nearly killing Atreus. Atreus manages to escape, with the mask quickly using a special one-way travel seat given to him by Sindri. They once again gather around the table, again one step ahead of Odin. And Tyr speaks up, saying he will lead the charge to Asgard after being totally aware of how useless he's been. The group is skeptical at first, but accepts Tyr's advances. All except Brock, who doesn't believe Tyr is being entirely honest, and after pressing Tyr about the matter, Tyr eventually stabs Brock in the heart and is revealed to be Odin in Tyr disguise all along. This switch was masterfully done, and I didn't see it coming at all. Freya attempts to revive Brock, but to no avail. Brock tells Sindri he knows what he did, and it's time for him to let go. After this, Kratos hands over the mask and Gjallarhorn, and him and Atreus leave, believing there's no point in this fight anymore, as they return to Midgard. When arriving back to Midgard, there's some serious parallels in the intro of the first game, where Atreus wants to go hunting as a way of coping with what just happened. Kratos goes with it until they arrive at a deer, and before Atreus takes a shot, he lowers his bow and explains to Atreus that they're running away because they've been wounded similar to animals, and how it's not right that they've come this far just to turn back. They go visit Sindri at Tyr's temple to apologize, and it's here where we see a truly broken Sindri, and when trying to speak to him, rejects our advances because he is trying to grieve. Take another tea break.
Felipe Johnson.
That's me.
Who are you?
I'm just an old guy,
How old?
70. I live in the woods, and my grandson told me about you.
I'm sick of your lies, Felipe! The skies are infinite, but they still have no room for lies.
After returning to Sindri's house, Kratos and Atreus make their way to Muspelheim to seek out the help of Surtur, who can turn into Ragnarok. After fighting for our life, Surtur eventually agrees to help us, but only by himself, as he wants to leave his wife, Sinmara, out of it. They travel to the Spark of the World, which is beautiful, by the way, and Kratos combines the flames of his Chaos Blades with Surtur's heart to cause the transformation. But before we see it, we're attacked by Valkyries, Friest, and Mies, and after another really fun boss fight, we get a confirmation that Ragnarok will be ready once we need it. Soon after, Kratos and Atreus join the group back in Midgard to rest up before battle. Atreus asks Kratos to tell him a story, and he does, with it seeming like foreshadowing to Kratos' death. But once Atreus falls asleep, Kratos follows suit and has a final dream sequence with Faye, where she tells Kratos to open his heart. Once they awake, it is time for war. They all gather in the old realm travel room, and Kratos gives a speech before blowing Gjallarhorn, calling all realms to war against Asgard. When they arrive at Asgard, we see the fighting has already begun. Something else I thought was really cool is that before they get active, Freyr extends his hand, calling upon his sword, Ingrid. Kratos and Atreus and Freya, and the others fight through Asgard. We see Angrboda and Fenrir, and Sindri comes from Svartalfheim alone, as he's not going to let any more dwarves die, for whatever cause this is. We find out Odin put the Midgardians on the front lines, knowing they can't fight, and around this time, Surtur in Ragnarok form shows up. Sindri destroys the machines, keeping Ragnarok at bay, and we play as Atreus and run into Thrud and Sif, who both soon agree on taking down Odin. We get to a point where we see Thor knock Jormungandr back in time before heading towards Kratos for the second boss fight with Thor, which is even more amazing, by the way. Once you win, Kratos tells Thor how they must be better for their children. Immediately after that, Odin shows up and kills Thor after he disobeys him. The Odin boss fight triggers, and after the first phase, Odin and Kratos give Atreus the option to put on the mask and gaze into the infinite knowledge rift. Atreus breaks the mask, which causing Odin to get even angrier. After defeating Odin in the second phase, Atreus tries to convince him to be better, and Odin says he's never going to change as he's clearly stuck in his ways. Atreus puts Odin's soul into a marble and hands it to Kratos, and Kratos hands it to Freya because he promised her he would never rob her of the choice between life or death again. But before she could decide, Sindri shows up and destroys it, teleports out, and at that moment, Ragnarok stabs his sword down into Asgard, while Freyr does his best to hold it off, ultimately sacrificing himself to save Freya and the group. When Atreus wakes up, he searches for his father, and on the journey there runs into characters like Lunda, Thrud, Mimir, and Freya, and he expresses his admiration and appreciation for all of them. He meets up with Angrboda and his father, and Angrboda says she has a surprise for both of them. And when they reach it, they discover it's a shrine that depicts all of their events throughout the game, totally contradicting fate. Atreus then tells his father there's a responsibility for him to find more giants, and it's something he has to do alone. I actually am going to let this scene play out because me describing it, especially in this tone, won't do it justice. So Chandler, you gotta find that scene and play it, like right now.
I need to do this alone. I don't want to do it alone, but I need to. hard to explain.
Does it frighten you?
Yeah.
That is why you must do it.
Like you taught me. Yeah.
We survived today because of your choices. Who to trust, who to call friend. Son, you are ready.
Remember our promise.
Loki will go. Atreus. Atreus remains.
Take care of everyone.
And then once that happens, the cinematic credits roll, but the true ending comes from Brock's funeral, and I'm also going to let that scene play out because it's also wonderful, and me talking about it won't do it justice. So Chandler, again, that scene right here.
infantry. Blackpuss.
A hole.
What?
Gets bigger the more you take away.
God, this tea is really good. Oh, sorry. Oh, the scene's over? Okay. So, this game was truly amazing in every sense of the word. I've been waiting for it since I've beaten the first one, and it lived up to every expectation imaginable. I don't think the game is perfect, but I think it's as close to perfect as perfect could be. The gameplay loop is fun, and the fighting feels so fluid and responsive. The bosses are so much better than the last game. There are so many great characters and moments throughout this whole game that this video was absolutely necessary, and even more videos in the future. I really wish that this was a trilogy, but it ends on such a great note that I'm completely satisfied with it. I also want to give a shout out, and I wasn't asked to do this at all, but I also want to give a shout out to a creator I watched by the name of Luke Stevens. If you guys don't watch Luke, you should definitely go check him out. He did a 4-hour critique of God of War Ragnarok. If you're into those kind of videos, please go over to his channel. It kind of prompted me to hit the gas pedal on this video, as listening to him talk about it made me want to talk about it even more. But he goes way more in depth. I mean, the video's 4 hours, and he also does videos on other games that long, so definitely go check him out. But after this video, of course, I appreciate you guys sticking around. And I also want to give a shout out to my editor for this video. I called him out a few times, but he is an absolute maniac for helping me out, but I really appreciate him so much. And I also want to thank all of you guys for watching this video and supporting me in any way you can and being so patient with this video. This won't be my last God of War video. This won't be my last God of War Ragnarok video, and I plan on making future videos like it. But because this video took so freaking long to make, you know, hopefully future videos like this are way better, and I hope you guys get a kick out of it. But anyway, I'm just kind of rambling on and going about it. Anyway, God of War Ragnarok was phenomenal. If you haven't played it, please go play it. And I plan on making more videos about it in the future. But if you guys really enjoyed this one and my small take on it, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Let me know how you guys felt about God of War Ragnarok. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Is it your game of the year? Let me know down in the comments below. And I think that's it for me, guys. I will talk to you all in the future. Peace.